Hello, my name's Jackie Carter. I'm the EDI Disability Academic Lead at the University of Manchester, and I've set up a series of in-conversation pieces called Let's Talk Disability. The reason for this is that I want people who have a disability and who work and study at the University of Manchester to have opportunity to share what their lived experience, their everyday experience is with somebody in a position of influence, a senior leader at the university. So each episode will feature 2 guests, and each of those guests will have a conversation about what it means to have a disability at the University of Manchester. And at the end of the conversation, each will commit to one action, we're calling them one things, where they will take away something from the conversation that they've had and do something with it. I hope you enjoy listening, and we'll make, of course, the transcripts available for everybody. Thank you. So welcome to episode 3 of the Let's Talk Disability series. And today I've got 2 guests who I feel I know quite well, and they're about to introduce themselves. But before they do, just to remind the listeners that the purpose of this recording is so that we can have honest and open and constructive conversations about disability, about the lived experience of disability at the University of Manchester. But the really important part of this is that it results in action. So we move from talking to action, because that's very important to us. So Kathy, can I start with you? Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Kathy Bradley. I'm EDI Partner in the Central EDI Directorate. I'm also lead on supporting with disability at the University of Manchester. And I do that from a personal point of view more than anything. I have disabilities, and very much plural. I live with ankylosing spondylitis. I'm a twice cancer survivor. I have mental health issues. And I'm in the process of finding out that I possibly have ADHD as well. So I kind of come to this with a vast lived experience of disability and living with disability and the struggles that can cause in the workplace and outside the workplace as well.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to say you are a disability advocate extraordinaire. It's phenomenal working with you. And before I hand over to Patrick, I should fill in the gap to say why I'm here, why I'm doing this. My name's Jackie Carter. I'm the EDI Disability Academic Lead at the University of Manchester. So Patrick, over to you, please.
Well, hello. My name is Patrick Hackett, and I'm the Registrar, Secretary and Chief Operating Officer at the University. And I've been here now for about 5.5 years. I'm amongst my many roles is one that I'm passionate about, which is our all-out champion on SLT. But I'm passionate about all matters inclusivity. And I'm here today partly because you've invited me, Jackie, but more importantly because I'm really passionate about the subject that we're going to discuss today.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you both so very much. So we have about 30 minutes and let's get into the conversation proper. So Kathy, I'm going to ask you to start. You've got Patrick here, you know Patrick, but what is it you'd like to ask as a representative of the EDI Directorate, but also a PS member of staff? How would you like to get the conversation going about Let's Talk Disability?
I think that's the point. We've branded these conversations as Let's Talk Disability. But unfortunately, disability gets left out in the conversation. It's the one protected characteristic, if that's what you want to call it, that any one of us could have at any point in our lives. You know, unfortunately, as we all age and we all do this, we all start to experience sight loss and deafness and not to mention arthritis and all of those other things that come with aging. But also we have accidents, and any one of us could become disabled. From my experience, I've said I'm a twice cancer survivor. I had breast cancer in 2008. I had endometrial cancer 2 years ago. And I'm very lucky. I survived and I got through it. But my treatment left me with probably significant disabilities. I put on a lot of weight, which has left me with skeletal disabilities. And I suppose I want disability to be just a normal part of everyday conversation in everything that we do. I genuinely sometimes feel like I'm the only voice in the room that is saying, have you thought about disabled people? And I'll be honest, and I've already said I have mental health problems. That is exhausting as a disabled person advocating for other disabled people. I'll be completely honest, I'm exhausted. And it's my job, and I love my job with a passion. I can never imagine me working anywhere else. And there is a positive side to this in that I was 50 this year. I've got a long career history, and the University of Manchester as a disabled person has been the best place I have ever worked as a disabled person. So there is that positive, and there are lots of things that we are doing really, really well. But talking about disability is not one of them. And it should not always be the same voices that are standing up. It should not always be me or Jackie or Rachel or Laura, Rachel Hayes and Laura Howard, who are always the ones in the room who are saying, have you thought about disability? And I find that really hard. I'll be completely honest. I find that really difficult.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you for your open and honest response to that opening question. And before I pass over to Patrick to respond, a couple of things you said there is about that continuous labour that disabled people need to put in anyway because of their disability, but in addition to that, to raise the profile of what it means to be disabled. So thank you again for being an advocate for that, but you are right, it is hard work. And secondly, if you don't mind me saying, because you didn't describe it, you described your symptoms and the disabilities that you have, but you didn't say you're a wheelchair user.
I am. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. I only use my wheelchair at work because I genuinely could not access the campus without it. I can't walk very far. I have a mobility vehicle that through my DLA, through Motability, I have a car. I couldn't live without my car. And I had this conversation this morning in another meeting. I don't think, and I'm going to be completely truthful, I'm not sure that people in estates understand the needs of disabled people. Sometimes there are a few pockets that really do. Generally, they don't. So if you've already driven an hour and a half into work, you come to your disabled parking spot, and actually it's been dug up and nobody told you that it was going to be dug up, and you've got to then park further away from the office, makes life very challenging. Little things like that mean a huge amount to disabled people, just being notified of things, because you can plan. We're amazing planners, disabled people, because we have to plan everything. Yeah. But I think, and I've mentioned estates, it's not only in estates, there are other areas of the university that this happens. But yeah, being a wheelchair user gives you a completely different focus on it than even just walking with sticks.
Thank you very much. And we will be inviting somebody from estates onto this series, as you know. Before I hand over, the only other thing I wanted to say is, yes, these conversations are about challenges. That's really important, but it's also about strengths. So we'll move to talking about strength in the second half. So Patrick, over to you.
Great, thank you. The first thing I would like to say, Cathy, is that I have the privilege of knowing you reasonably well. We work together on lots of different things, and you are an inspiration, I have to say. You are an absolute inspiration. And please don't give up everything that you're doing. You are being heard. I do feel that whilst there's still a lot to do in our university, nobody's naive about that. But I do think we're on a really positive journey. The fact that we're here today having this conversation is just another real example that we're on a positive journey. Jackie holding us to account by agreeing clear outcomes and actions from this meeting shows that we're not just talking about it, we're doing it as well. And I looked back at some of the statistics around this just to help me think about preparing for today. And the number of staff and students overall who declare a disability in the university
That's one thing I really
grown.
want to change, Patrick.
Yes.
I'm so sorry for interrupting. I'd really like us to change that language to sharing a disability. Declaring feels like something wrong.
Thank you.
That we've got something wrong.
Well,
Sorry to challenge
that's
you
really
on it.
no. Don't. It's not a challenge. I want to learn as well
That's
from
what these
from this.
conversations are about.
Absolutely. For me, back in 2019, fewer than 6% of our staff and students shared the fact that they have a disability. In 2023, that's now over 8%.
Yeah.
And to me, that hopefully is showing us that we're more open and transparent and feeling that people can safely share their disability with all of us. So that's a good thing. What we absolutely have to do is then respond, and not just respond in a reactive way, but be proactive. So your point about estates issues is something that's very close to my heart, because I'm an architect by profession. So from the very beginning of my career, every time I thought about a project, I always thought about access and use of facilities right from the very, very beginning. So it's been with me all my life. And it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It hasn't changed from being an architect to being where I am now as a chief operating officer.
Yeah.
In fact, it's even more important and more broad in its scope as well now. So, yes, on the estate side, estates colleagues, I believe, are very genuine about this, as we all are. We're all faced with competing priorities, limited resources, all of those things. But I think the scope for us to be really innovative in how we do things, that's where we will make probably quicker progress in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a huge opportunity as we shift. I mean, the university has changed so much since I joined. Our focus on disability has changed so much, and that's down to some incredible people, down to A-list, down to Jackie, the network leads, Kirsty and Jess, and the current network leads. Yes, we are on that upward trajectory. I think, and maybe this is part of why people are saying to me, I'm ADHD. I'm not even a bit ADHD. I'm definitely ADHD. But there's that ambition, isn't there, that we are the University of Manchester. We could be the sector leading. We could be the absolute pinnacle of what we should be doing for the university sector in the UK. And I, by the time I retire, whether that's in 10, 15 years' time, I don't know. I would like to turn around and say, yes, that was part of my legacy that I left at the University of Manchester, that disabled students can come and study with us and just know that we've got it right. Staff can just walk through the door and just come in with confidence that they haven't got to worry that they're going to get their adjustments, that the manager understands the reason they need adjustments. They can hybrid work if they need to. Gosh, that's so valuable. It's all of that. I really want to look back and say, you know what, I had a hand in that. I was part of that, and that Manchester is the best place to come for disabled students and staff.
And apart from, I think, rightly, not having to spend your time always talking about disabled issues, that you want senior leaders, all of our leaders should be talking about this all the time, frankly. I completely agree with that. What are the things you think we could now do, given where we've got to as a university? What are the things we could do that would make us genuinely world leading in this area, in the same way that we want to be world leading in our research and want to be world leading with our student experience? How can we be world leading in the experience of all of our colleagues in an inclusive way?
I think we've got to start. I always think it's kind of baby steps. We can't do everything overnight. We've got a long way to go. And, I've said before, we're doing some amazing stuff, but there's still a lot to do. I think baby steps is, I want to see more non-disabled people stand up and say, do you know what? We should be talking about this as well. We shouldn't be leaving it to those who are living with this. You know, if I'm in a meeting, it's not just my voice that is saying, have you thought about disabled people? You know, I could almost press record on my phone and just play it at every meeting because I say it that often. But that non-disabled people are saying, actually, we've not got this quite right. You know, we should be putting, if a non-disabled person says, we should be putting in sliding doors instead of electric doors. You know, we should be thinking about neurodivergent people when we're doing buildings. If they're saying that, it almost kind of makes our voices that little bit more powerful. It's not just us. It's not just another angry disabled person saying, why haven't you done this for me? It's not about doing it for me, actually. In some respects, it's about doing it for that student that's going to join us in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, or that member of staff who's going to walk through the door when I'm not even here. You know, and we've done it right, and we've done it now.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, if I can jump on that, Patrick, because that was such a good question. And disability inclusion, as is inclusion generally, is everybody's job.
Yeah.
It's not just for the... actually, do you know that disabled people are the largest minoritised group? Okay, so, you know, 20% of the population, you gave those stats earlier, but actually, according to official Office for National Statistics figures, 20% of the population would describe themselves as having a disability. So, you know, we're falling short of even capturing half of that data, if you like. But it's everybody's business, and you're right to sort of point out that we all need to be talking about it. And I guess I'm going to just, if I may, on your behalf, Kathy, sort of ask Patrick to talk about, I don't know, but for want of a better term, allyship. I'm not sure I like the term allyship, but, you know, to get other people to be supportive of what Kathy's been talking about in disability in all its forms, in the whole spectrum.
Well, I think let me give you an example of what I do with my leadership team, how we together think about these things. We've agreed that as a professional services leadership team, we agree every year 2 objectives as a team around EDI and inclusivity more generally. We also include specific EDI objectives in each individual's PDO objectives for the coming year. And we hold ourselves to account for those. We have a champion, Sinead Hesp, who's doing an amazing role championing EDI across professional services. I think what I'm getting, you know, from this conversation is that I think I would have to hold my hands up and say, do I always think about disability when I think about all inclusivity issues? I think I do a lot of the time, but I would say I don't do all of the time, frankly.
I think that's very honest, and I think you probably represent the majority of people who don't necessarily think about it, you know, through no malintention. Yeah.
So I think with this conversation, maybe we will prompt others like me to think, well, hang on a minute, maybe I need to be a bit more conscious about these things, not just unconscious about them or subconscious about them. The other thing I wanted to say in response to what Kathy was saying, and this came to me really powerfully when I was at an AHUA networking event in Sheffield Hallam late last year. AHUA is the Association of Heads of University Administration, right. So COOs, secretaries like me. And we had the most inspiring session on neurodivergence. And what I learned from that is that this isn't about accommodating people's disabilities in a sort of a deficit model way. This is about how do we ensure that as a university we're able to attract and retain the brightest people that can make the most amazing contributions to our university. And that was particularly true in neurodivergence. If you work out what your complementary skills are, and when you think about how you're putting a team together, and then you get amazing outcomes. And I think that's true across all of our EDI objectives. And actually, if you think about it that way, it's a really positive, encouraging way of thinking about these things.
Well, thank you for that realization that we talk about a lot, don't we, Kathy, in the sessions that we go to. And you're so right to focus on that, because we often have this deficit narrative around a protected characteristic, but we shine the light from the other direction and say, but what do these people bring? They bring diversity of thought, experience, different lived experience, the ability to interact with people like them, and certainly being in a leadership position now at the University of Manchester, being a disabled person in that leadership position, it sends out such a strong signal.
Yeah.
People like me, people like Kathy can get into these positions, and that's so important. And I know you're dying to speak, but I'm also going to just prompt a question in both your minds, because we are talking about excellence and leadership and about being world leading. I love that phrase. And knowing that we've got a way to go to get there. However, I believe strongly that there's no way on earth that we can't get there if we work collectively together and bring in the right people and the right resources. So I'd like you to be thinking about how we can go from where we are to where we really want to be.
It's a big question, and maybe like Kathy, the key to this is to break it down into small things. I guess one really obvious thing we could do, I could certainly do, is take away with my leadership team with SLT and encourage them with their leadership teams to consciously put this on the agenda. We're all very busy. There's a lot going on in the university. I still think we're feeling the legacy effects of the pandemic. Not everybody's feeling in a great place. We're worrying about workload rightly and all those issues. And sometimes that means the agendas that we have are either very long or not really prioritized. I think for me, saying that this would be a top priority agenda item for all of our discussions would be a really good first step. Partly because, I certainly don't have all the answers, far from it. And if we can empower and encourage all of our teams to have the conversation and be empowered to do things, we can take those small steps right across the university.
I think the one thing I'd say to that is for those teams that have those conversations and think, oh, I could do this or I could do that. Please don't do that without including us as disabled people. It's so important that we're included and we co-produce these things, because, and even groups of disabled people, we're all very different. We all have, even people with the same condition have different needs. So we really need to be included in those conversations. I posted something recently on LinkedIn, just something simple, and I just said, this is me. I'm a disabled person, but I'm disabled by the environment around me. I'm not disabled by my conditions. I'm not disabled because I've had cancer, because I've got ankylosing spondylitis, because I can't walk very far. My brain is as good as it's ever been. I can contribute as much as I ever have. I just can't physically get there that easily, or I can't get through the door, And if you can see disabled people doing that and you talk to them, that's so much more powerful. That co-production is so important.
And again, back to these conversations, that is partly why we want to do this, to make visible the stories behind the lived experience. Patrick, I don't know if you were going to jump in there, but I was also going to ask, you've given us a really good idea about you prioritising this area in inclusion. But you both also talked, perhaps a little bit in the abstract, about what that would mean. So you've talked about co-production. Nothing about us without us is just, the mantra we use in disabled spaces. But what, practically speaking, might that look like? What would it be helpful for you as registrar and your senior leaders to know, to be able to start those conversations? Because often it's a case of people just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
But isn't that the point? You start with the conversation. So the point I was going to make there earlier was that we had a PSLT Leadership Away Day recently in our amazing museum. And we talk a lot within our leadership team about how do we think about our services and how do we design our services. And sometimes there's a risk of just thinking about what we think the services should look like. Whereas Kathy's point that, we really got to talk to our colleagues and our students and our community about what are the services that they need and how do they need those services delivered to them. So we invited a group of students led by the student union to our away day, and some are representing diverse groups, and we had an amazing conversation. Okay, so I things that I didn't even think about came up in the conversation. So without overcomplicating it or oversimplifying it, starting with the conversation will lead to something that we haven't thought about.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll stop. Do you know what? It'll stop that angry disabled person. That person that can't get through the door to their lecture or can't access a toilet because somebody's put a padlock on the outside of an accessible toilet, or those kind of things that turn us into those angry disabled people, because actually it's so frustrating because you don't know what that person has experienced the rest of their day. If that one thing has made them angry, it could just be a culmination of lots of things that have gone on. But if we don't talk to people, that's never going to change.
Yeah, indeed. I'm going to come in very quickly and talk about, you've talked about it being exhausting, Kathy, and I think the reality of the day-to-dayness, this is about lived experience and the day-to-dayness of doing this. And we've talked about having those conversations, but I still want to push a little bit more on. There are people who don't feel comfortable in having those conversations. So do you have any thoughts? I think it's beholden on us as a university to ensure that people can find safe spaces to have those conversations and speak to individuals. And I think the mood is shifting. I think we're seeing and hearing more of that. But do you have any thoughts about how we can improve with regards to people who might be reluctant, hesitant to share?
I've got thoughts. I've got thoughts, Jackie.
But these conversations about sharing those thoughts.
I think... Do you know what? As part of my leadership, and yes, I am looked at as a leader, I'm very open and honest, and I share my story. I use storytelling as part of my practice, and it works, and it starts people feeling safe to open those conversations. I want to see our leadership team. We don't see members of our leadership team with disabilities. We don't see them being open and honest, because I'm sure there are members of our leadership team who have mental health problems, who have long-term health conditions, who have disabilities, but they're not visible about them. And I think that is one big thing that we could do. It's not my one big thing that I will come to later, but it is another thing that we could do to make people feel safe, to see that actually the people who are running the university are living this experience as well, as the people who are, in the lower grades. Does that make sense?
well, it's borne out in the data as well, Kathy. Yeah. Fewer senior staff have shared a disability, and as you say, I'm sure that's not because there aren't any. They're just not willing or feeling comfortable about sharing. I have to say, I don't know what the answer is to helping those senior leaders to feel comfortable about sharing, actually. So I'm sorry about that.
I think that's something for me to take away, Patrick. Yeah. I think that falls within my remit.
Yeah, I do think that's an area that maybe it's like so many things, leaders ideally will lead by example.
Indeed.
And, this is probably an area where we could improve.
Great. Well, it's good to think about, where we can improve. We've got lots of positive energy coming from this conversation, I think, in terms of commitment, what we can do together and how we can open up the conversation more broadly and give people license and permission to talk about that in a safe way with no repercussions. So we're coming to the end of the conversation now, and I, as you know, have already prompted you to think about just one thing. What one thing would you want to do? So, Kathy, do you want to start by asking Patrick, and then we'll...
Yeah, of course. So, Patrick, what one thing would make a difference? What one thing will you commit to do, as a result of our conversation today?
So I've kind of changed it based on the conversation that we've had today. But to me, it's a renewed commitment to working with my team, because I can't do things myself on my own. Well, I can do certain things on myself, but I think my most important role is as a leader within a team, within a wider team. And what I'm recommitting to today is that our leadership team will put this on our agenda, will make it part of our objective setting as a team and as individuals.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
And now it's your turn to ask Kathy.
Okay, Kathy. So what's the one thing that would make a difference to your lived experience here at our university?
The one thing I think for me, and I know a lot of disabled staff that I talk to, would be that advocate role to try and take some of the burden off us as disabled people to fight for what we need. We need leadership advocacy to help us do that. You know, my 9 to 5 is wonderful. I love my job, but I genuinely am exhausted. And we need that advocacy so it isn't just my voice. You know, it isn't just Jackie's voice, but it's your voice too, Patrick, or it's Nalin's voice, it's, you know, Duncan's voice when he arrives. That is saying we need to be doing better for our disabled people.
And now that you mentioned Duncan, I can't help saying to you that in the conversations that we've had with him so far, very early conversations have been about inclusivity, have been about equality, diversity and inclusion in our university. He's genuinely passionate about this.
That's amazing.
Which is wonderful. On the advocacy point, I will take that away as well with all my leadership group and my peers and talk about the need for all of us to talk up about these issues.
Thank you both very much. Just for the record, so that people know who are listening to this, we've been talking about Duncan, who's Professor Duncan Iverson, who's the new Vice-Chancellor, who's going to be joining us in the autumn. And we know that he's strongly committed to equality, diversity and inclusion. So I just wanted to finish by saying thank you both of you very, very much indeed today for having a very lively conversation, and I think we've opened up some, real points of discussion that we're going to commit to and take forward. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying, as a result of the University of Manchester, with Kathy's help, achieving the Disability Confident Leader status, one of the things that will follow that Kathy and I are currently working on is an action plan with action owners. So we'll be sure to feed this discussion into that action plan and maybe think of it as a blueprint for working with other parts of the university as well. So thank you both very much, and lovely to see you. Thanks for participating. Any final words?
Just to thank Patrick for listening. I know it's not always easy kind of listening about these conversations, and so I'm really grateful for giving us the time to do this.
Thank you, Kathy.
I just want to thank both of you. You are wonderful colleagues in a great institution.
Thank you.
Thank you both.